There's more than one way to make this. Everyone might have a different style, but this is what's worked for us. You can make this vegetarian or with meat. So we're gonna do it both ways because Dina does not eat meat and we do eat meat. It's so simple with the Beyond Beef or the meat alternative products. First, we're gonna make the dough. And I think everyone has the recipe. And we have everything measured out like the experts do.
Like the real TV shows do.
Okay, so, we okay, Beth?
Can you see us?
Yeah, it's fine.
Okay, so we're gonna add 3.5 cups.
Well, we're making half a recipe.
Well, I sent them
Okay,
half
sorry,
a recipe.
sorry, yes,
The recipe
okay.
you have, it would take about, maybe, an hour and a half or so to make. We're gonna show, and if you wanna make multiples of that recipe, of course, double it and whatever. So I think it's 3.5 cups of just white unbleached flour. This is so fun.
It is fun.
All right. And 1 cup of water. It's nice, I got people doing the dishes and everything, like experts.
I'm the supervisor.
1 cup of water. And we're doing it in the food processor. We're making the dough. Add 1 cup of water.
I haven't taken mine out of the box.
And then 1/4 cup of extra virgin olive oil. It's really simple. And 1/4 cup of vegetable oil. All right. Oh, I need this now. A little bit of salt. I don't usually measure the salt, sorry. And then 1/8 of a cup of milk, which I just do half of 1/4 of a cup. I mean, you could probably find how many tablespoons, but I'm just doing 1/8 of a cup of milk.
Wing it. It'll be fine.
Okay. And then I just got this food processor. Okay.
Loud noise.
Yeah, be careful, it's gonna be loud. Okay, I'm just gonna check on it. And actually, my daughter Jackie is really the dough expert in our family. So she's going to show.
Want me to pull you out?
But you know what? Okay, well, let's get this to the right, make sure it feels good and everything, and then we'll set it aside into the meat, and then we'll pull it out. How's it feel? It's good.
Put some flour down.
Okay. So that's how we do the dough. Super easy. Next,
Can you get the meat in?
just leave it. We took 1 onion and.
Cindy, I have a question. I have a question.
Yes.
Okay, how should the dough feel?
Jackie, how is it?
It's like a little sticky, but it won't stick to my hands.
Now, you put a full cup of water,
Yes.
Oh, she's making it.
a full cup of, yeah. Am I the only one making it? Okay.
No, I want to make it too. I just started late.
We're going so fast. Slow down.
I'm sorry. We're
Wait,
nervous.
wait,
We're working on my dough here.
wait. So you put a full cup of water, right?
Yes.
Okay, so I need to add water. So it should be exactly how you...
Yeah, I can see it shapes it. It's a little sticky and
Okay.
a little wet, but it's not sticking to my hands.
And you ran the machine for just half a minute?
Yeah.
Yeah, just until you see it start
All
to
combined.
clump in. Yeah, it'll form
forms
like
a
a big
ball.
ball.
Okay, thank you.
Now we're
If
gonna,
mine is not forming into a big ball, do I add more water? Do I add more milk? Which one do I add more?
it's okay if it's not forming into a big ball. With your hand, scoop the dough from the bowl and feel it.
It should come out.
I don't know. I wish you guys could feel it. See, it can like pull. We should do like a drip test.
Jeez. Okay.
Okay, so I want to make the dough, Cindy and Dina. Like, what do I? Just tell me. 3.5 cups flour. What else?
1 cup of water,
Okay.
a 1/4 cup olive oil,
Okay. All of that in the dough. Okay. Gotcha.
a 1/4 cup of vegetable oil, and some salt,
Okay.
and 1/8 of a cup of milk, which is half
Got
of
it.
a 1/4 cup, all in the food
Okay.
processor.
I think.
Okay? So then we're gonna do, and so, yeah, don't do anything, Jackie. Just
Well,
wait.
I'm just getting the flour.
We're also, that can, that's one process, which is no big deal. Then we're gonna take a pound of ground beef, and actually, a little higher of the fat content is, to us, it's better. So I got the 80-20 fat content of the beef because you want, that grease adds flavor to the dough when it's baking, and it's good. So I got 80-20, I have a pound. I'm gonna open it up,
And I'm doing it with Beyond Beef for the vegetarian version.
a pound,
A pound of it.
and we're gonna put it in our bowl.
I can open it.
Scissors.
Good Lord.
This end looks open already.
Got it. This is half the challenge.
And then we each took an onion and in the machine before this, I diced it really, really fine. It's best in the machine, I think, because you don't want to eat Monty with big chunks of onion. At least us. Everyone is different, but we want it pretty fine. There's some juice there from sitting from the onion, but that's fine. We're gonna add it right to the meat.
Roughly how big was the onion?
It was like a Vidalia. It was, like this, bigger than my fist.
Okay.
Pretty good size. It's very flavorful. So
Yeah.
You're just adding the meat and the onion together right now,
right
yes?
now, that's what we're doing. Meat and onion. And while everyone's catching up, we're just gonna incorporate the meat and the onion.
My favorite part. I know.
It
does not smell good.
Yeah, the Beyond Beef, during Lent, my girls and I made it. Do you need to add to this one?
Oh wait, this is a chat.
Oh.
Karen. I do the meat the night before. It works really well.
Oh, nice
okay.
idea.
Yeah, so the Beyond Beef is I just lost the laptop there.
Sorry.
The Beyond Beef is nice during Lent. It does have a different consistency, so when you're pinching it into
You'll
the
see.
little pockets, it's a little different than actual meat. But
How do you know you've never made it before?
I've never made it
But she
before.
had it.
I'm always the runner in the kitchen.
I made it and gave her some, so it's still good. It really is. It really is fine.
Okay.
All right. So we have the meat and the onion in one bowl.
Come on, make sure everyone's.
Yeah. I'm just gonna wash my hands. I find my recipe. Some people want to salt and pepper the meat. That's fine too. Everyone does it a little bit different.
You put garlic in it.
What else?
Yeah, they do.
Dina, how are you doing with the meat?
Oh, I did the Beyond Beef.
I know. How are you
Even
doing?
that I don't like doing. That whole texture thing, not for me. But
I know.
I'm gonna man up during Monty.
Okay.
I like eating it, so I have to suffer through the process of making it. So
How are we doing? Everyone comfortable? Okay, if we start rolling the dough? Okay, so Jackie is the expert at the dough rolling.
Can I hold it or something?
Okay, Jackie.
Okay, I'm rolling it onto a cutting board only so that we can move it and sit down to pinch. But if you roll it onto the counter, then just know you're gonna pinch from the counter. And so because I'm rolling on a cutting board, I'm gonna do about like a quarter of the dough. And then we're gonna take the rest of the dough and wrap it in saran wrap so that it doesn't lose any moisture. Then I flour my surface and I flour my rolling pin. And I just start rolling.
How thin are you getting the dough?
Pretty thin. Nama's the judge of that.
Like paper thin.
Oh, wait.
Do we have to refrigerate the dough, or because I'm ready on the dough part?
No, you don't have to refrigerate it.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
And I like to flip my dough and stretch it just because it makes it easier to roll. I get folds in it and I just keep going.
And she's really pressing down.
It doesn't have to be beautiful. I try as much as I can to get it into a square so that cutting it, I can be like super orthogonal with it.
Orthogonal, that's a word.
Big word. This is the hardest part, I think, is the dough. Rolling it.
This is my hand. Recipe.
The good thing is we can trim it and reuse the dough. We can re-roll it.
So we've already taken the rest of the dough and wrapped it.
So if you can see here, it's starting to get pretty thin on these edges, but it's still really thick in the middle, so I'm just going to keep rolling it out.
Somebody, a couple of them are making it.
Yeah, people are making it.
Cracks me up.
What do you think, Jeff? Pretty good?
Yeah. When I push into it, you can't even see my fingerprint. Here's this is the thickness reference. It's very thin. If you see over here, I have wrinkles, and it'll all be fine. You're just gonna cut it up and pinch it, so it doesn't have to be beautiful. I have a tear in it.
That's okay.
Then, what we like to use is a ruler, a stainless steel ruler.
That we
Helps.
cleaned.
Yes, we
Sorry to
cleaned
watch.
it, and a knife to cut it. Some people like to use pizza cutters or something like that, but I like a knife.
A straight edge is the
Yeah.
main thing.
Yeah. So I make my squares the width of this ruler. It's a little more than 1 inch, I believe, and it's just a good reference for us, and it makes it easy. It really does not have to be exact. If your ruler is a little bit thinner or your straight edge, you can just eyeball it. There's no reason to measure it. And then I just cut. So I'm gonna make squares. So I make a cut and then I line the other edge of the ruler up to that cut I just made.
So they're about a little over 1 inch wide.
Yep. And I'm just making strips. Sometimes when you cut it, the dough will shrink a little bit. That's fine. Usually I think that's when it's a little bit too thick. But it looks pretty good right now.
Yeah.
You also want to avoid playing with the dough as much as possible because that'll make it harder and harder to roll.
Ooh, I don't like it.
Also, if you're cutting on your countertop, just be aware of that. You probably don't want to ruin your countertop.
I have a question.
Yes.
How big are the squares?
So they're going to be a little bit bigger than 1 by 1. We're just using the size of our ruler, the width of it. That's my measurement. It doesn't have to be exact. If you want bigger, Monty, you can make it bigger. If you want smaller, you can make it smaller.
Approximately an inch all the way around.
Okay. And then shouldn't we have a pan ready? So what should we oil the pan in which we got?
Not yet.
Not yet.
We'll show you.
No, because once we pinch them, we have. Okay.
Oh yeah. Once she'll cut it. Well, you're gonna cut it into squares.
Yeah.
After she's done cutting it, we'll prep the pan.
So one thing that I did do when I'm cutting it is I try to start and line up my ruler to the straightest edge. That way I can get the most out of my dough. So when I go to make it perpendicular, I do the same.
This isn't math.
Well, I'm just saying. You don't want to be rolling it out 8 times.
Don't.
Keep yourself.
Look at all 3 of yours. Do you want to tell them that you turned?
How are we doing?
Do you want to tell them that your oven's on it?
How's everyone doing?
I also just preheated my oven to 375.
Ah. Okay.
Okay, Jackie's gonna show the squares.
Oh, here. Let's show Jackie.
She's kind of just trimming.
This is the dough that was on the edge of the cutting board. Can you move and I'll hold it up? Okay, so here are my squares. They're about 1 by 1. Nothing perfect. Some of them have wrinkles in them over here. And I don't like to clean it up because sometimes you can use one with like half a corner. They don't have to be perfect.
And I took the scraps and put them back into the leftover dough, which is wrapped in saran.
Right.
Okay. I have, in the meantime, I melted some butter.
How much butter?
I in the recipe that everyone has, I said 4 tablespoons. Whatever, like half a stick, but you'll probably need more. But anyway, I melted some butter, and we're gonna use a sheet pan. Once we make them individually, we're gonna put them on this pan. But first, we like the pan to be buttered. So with my pastry brush, I'm just lightly greasing the pan.
This helps them.
Yes.
It does. It helps the Monty get nice and brown when you're baking it.
Yeah. So I'm buttering the pan. Okay. And now the pan is prepped. It's buttered. It's not dripping, but it's just lightly coated with butter. And we are going to start pinching now. And this is the tedious part of Monty. And all you do is, here, I'll hand you some. You lift up a square of dough. It lifts up easily we're using a cutting board. And you use yours. Now, everyone has a different technique. We take a little bit of the meat, we place it in the center, can you see? Center of the square. Get closer. Oh, good, Jackie. And then what we do is we pinch the sides.
Not diagonally, just like you're folding it in half. And we pinch it in with a little bit of meat. So I have some meat here and I just pinch it.
So and you want it literally sealed on the sides. So this is what it looks like. It's sealed and sealed, and there's some meat sticking out. Now, everyone has a different, and Dina's is with the meat alternative. You know what, Dina? Let me make you your own tray. A couple things. Sometimes people are tempted to make a meatball and then like a little round meatball and put it in the dough. Everyone has a different experience, but our experience is that meatball, when you're putting it in the broth for your soup, sometimes that meatball falls out. Whereas if you take just a glob of meat and kind of incorporate it with the dough when you're pinching the sides of the dough, it tends to stay in better. But everyone has a different philosophy.
Now, another technique that we just discovered during quarantine is when you roll out the dough, the top side gets a little bit more dry. So if you take the square and actually turn it upside down so that the bottom is sticking up, so the top of it is in my palm and the bottom is sticking up, and now I put meat in it, we find that it pinches better. It's a little bit more,
because the inside is now sticky.
Yeah.
Because the inside is now stickier.
Right, it's got a little bit more moisture, so it sticks together. If that doesn't work, or if you don't want to do that, we also have a bowl of water that you can dip your fingers in. And if you just dip your fingers and wipe the side of the dough, that'll help it stick too.
So when we're making this, we line them up on the pan as close as possible together, but without touching. And so we're not going to do the whole thing here, but when it's done, this whole pan is going to have rows and rows of Manti on the pan.
And so it creates a little bottom for them. They don't have to be perfect.
So this is a labor of love, and it takes some getting used to do it. And the other thing is, like, you think this is a lot of work for one meal, and it is, but you're also going to have a lot to freeze and make future meals with, and those future meals will take literally 3 minutes to make, because you're going to take them from the freezer and into boiling broth, which we'll show you how to do in a bit.
In just a second, actually.
And it also takes trial and error to figure out the amount of meat that you put in it. Like, I like to put a lot of meat and, like, not a lot of dough, and Val doesn't like to do that. So it's just, like, different.
It's all personal preference.
And I will tell you also that the Beyond Beef has a different texture than regular beef, and it's a little wetter. And so I like to dab it with a little bit of a paper towel. I mean, I do it with anything I make with this Beyond Beef, so you might need to kind of paper towel it a little bit so it's not too wet.
Here, wait, this will show you a better view of the thickness of the dough.
No. Even that's
This
a
is a
little
little
thick. But you know what? So Jackie just picked that up and we discovered, that's a little thick. She can take her fingers and kind of, before she stretch it, she kind of can stretch it before loading it with meat and pinching.
Or I can just put more meat in there.
Yeah, Jackie likes to put a lot of meat. So
How's my boat? How's my boat? Does it look good?
Perfect.
How close together? How close together do we put them on the pan?
As close as possible.
Here, show her.
Without touching.
Here.
Without touching. Okay.
Auntie Dina, yours
Yeah,
is a little
I know. I have to.
Is it okay if they fall over or no?
Yeah, they do. Do you see my pan?
Yes.
Yeah, they will fall over sometimes. It's not the end of the world.
And how hot do we put the oven?
375.
Okay.
convection.
Yeah. Well, I still think 375. Just say standard 375. So let's pretend, because now this is what takes all the time, is this pinching and pinching.
Let's put 4 of them in one.
This pinching and pinching, this takes all the time. So let's pretend that my tray is full and I'm ready to bake. What I will do is, before baking, I'm going to go back to my melted butter, and this is what makes it taste so yummy, is I'll take the brush in the melted butter, and I'm going to take my Manti, the raw Manti, and I'm dabbing the tops of each one with some melted butter. You see? And you don't have to even be shy. It's absolutely delicious. Okay? And then, so we'll do this whole tray and dab the whole tray and then put it in the oven and it's baking. Partway through baking, you might want to pull it out, give it a turn in the oven and dab again with melted butter because
Can you go wrong?
right, what's bad about melted butter? So we actually do. We give it a half a turn halfway through, and it's gonna take a little bit of time in the oven. We want them golden brown, so it might take 25 minutes. So maybe 15 minutes into the baking, we turn it halfway, dab again with the butter, put it back in. Keep your eye on it. Val, will you then? And then hold on.
Sorry.
This is the finished product. And so I'm going to show you some. Whoops, sorry. It's hard to see where the camera is.
It's right
Oh,
there.
I'm sorry. I'm not very techy. Anyway, so these are, so it's browned. The dough is golden.
Sometimes if it takes a while, we turn the broiler on real quick.
Yeah, you can. So we fill this bag and put it in the freezer. But now, if we want to eat it, let's fast forward and say, okay, it's time to make a meal of this. So Val, you want to bring the camera over?
You don't have to freeze it to make a meal. You can eat it right after you bake it, or you can cook it in broth that night.
Okay, so what I have done is you can use vegetable broth. I use chicken broth, and I took 1 can of chicken broth, and I'm bringing it to a boil. And to this chicken broth, we like to add, and I don't know if this is normal or not, but I add about a tablespoon, maybe not even a tablespoon, of tomato paste. So I'm going to add tomato paste to this boiling broth. Okay. Yeah, can you show it?
Oh yes, of course. Yep, let's just
See how it's like orangish?
like that.
Reddish, orangish, and it's going to be boiling in 1 second. Okay, so it's a good boil. So now I'm going to add, I'm just going to say, a handful because we're not really ready to eat it, but we're pretending. I'm adding it to the broth, and I don't let it sit, it's frozen. I did mine from the freezer right now into this broth, and honestly, that's enough. I don't like to soak this in the broth because it's going to get like waterlogged almost and get too moist. So I'm going to turn this off right now. And hold on.
What do you say? Hi.
Hi, everybody.
Sorry. Okay. So when we serve it, everyone in my family wants more Manti and less broth in their soup because that's the point. That's the good part. So we don't do a ton of broth.
Can we lift up?
So, oops, sorry. So, and then, so they were not in that broth. My frozen Manti was not in the broth for what?
15 seconds.
20 seconds, not even 30 seconds. And then what we like to do is, well, some people in my family like it and some people don't, is add a dollop of yogurt, or what we call madzun, right into the soup. Like this. Oops. See it? And then we take a little bit of the yogurt in each spoon, a little yogurt, a little broth, and a little Manti, and eat it. Some people like to add garlic to their yogurt first, and that adds a nice flavor too.
You can definitely use more broth though, too.
Yeah, you can make the soup however you want. My family likes less broth and more Monty because that's the star of the show. Now I have to feed Jackie. So, really, did I miss anything?
I don't think so. I think that's it.
Oh, it's so good. What
So,
question?
I have a question.
Yeah.
So, Cindy, when I made this with my mom, so after we cut the squares, we added the meat to all squares and then and we pinched, and it went really quick, it went fast. So that's the quick way to do it too.
That's true too. Some people, like at church, when we used to do this for church and sell, 50 pounds of this, it's exhausting.
Right.
And so sometimes we would work like an assembly line and cut the squares and then meat.
Right.
Pinch.
Right.
With my family, when we're doing it, because we're not doing a ton, we each do our own meat and pinching. But, anything works. Whatever you find works best for you and your helpers. The more helpers, the better, honestly, because now I'm going to sit everyone down at the kitchen table. Since we have everything ready, we're all going to wash our hands and we're all going to get busy pinching because
it looks delicious.
This is a really good thing to do when you're sitting down, really, because you can take everything to the table, sit down and pinch because it's a labor of love. It takes time, but you can sit and do it.
Yeah, and you can be social. We sit around the table. Jack just
turn on Netflix
and we just sit at the table. We pinch. One of us, when the tray is full, dabs it with butter, puts it in the oven, keep going.
So then somebody's rolling out the next dough.
Can you freeze excess dough or refrigerate it?
I kept it in the fridge for a couple days last time and it was fine.
Okay.
Sorry.
You can also do half a recipe.
Okay, that was fun.
Sorry, trying to add somebody.
Hey, Cindy, it's Mona. My grandma, with the extra dough, just my 2 cents, what my grandma used to do is cut diamonds and make croutons out of it for the Manti soup.
Oh, nice. Put them in just the dough in the oven, bake
Yeah, and like you're doing with the butter on top of the Manti itself, put that on top of the crouton and bake it in the oven. And I could just eat that like as a snack. It was so delicious.
That's like the shortcut version of Monty.
Without the meat. No meat.
Right. Would she pinch it? Did she?
No. Just cut it in triangle. And like a crouton, bake it. It was yummy.
Ooh, that's a nice idea. What else? Any question? I mean, some people, I don't usually do garlic in the yogurt. But I know a lot of people do.
Or lemon. So, I don't know.
Here's our,
Okay, so I didn't measure this. So some of mine are real small and some of mine are real big. So I'll have to get like a ruler kind of thing, right? And just kind of do the 1 inch by 1 inch.
Yeah.
1
inch by 1 inch.
Kind of like.
Yep, that's perfect.
You know what? They still taste good even if they're not perfect looking.
in the chat, J.R. Hadaj put a picture of what their Monty looked like.
Okay.
It's just for reference.
So everyone's having Monty for dinner?
Oh, yeah.
It's so good. Honestly, you can put the kids to work. If you have little ones, it's easy for them to do. You can sit them at the table and they can do the pinching. But we did find that turning the squares after they've been rolled, turning the squares upside down and putting the filling in that downside was kind of nice. What?
You don't need to yell.
Oh, sorry. But it seemed easier to seal, really, a lot easier to seal.
Because it's a little stickier.
Yeah, it was nice. Nina, are yours okay?
Thank you so much. Enjoy your
Thank
Monties.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Have a good set.